my name is Debbie, Alligator Stitcher. Welcome to Flosstube number 16. Today is Wednesday, August 18th, 2021. This is a video mainly about cross stitch, but a little bit about what I'm watching and reading and life thrown in. Welcome back to all my returning viewers, and if this is your first time here, welcome. I hope that you like what you see and hit the subscribe button. And thank you to everyone who's left me comments. I love to read them and have that interaction with you. It's a lot of fun and a big reason why I do these videos. First things first, I'm going to jump into life. I know I put a lot of that at the end, but I'm going to talk about it today because you can kind of see here, my arm is in a sling. So about a week and a half ago, I tripped and fell. I was on my porch outside, and it's basically brick over concrete, and I landed on my left palm. And initially I just thought, this hurts quite a bit, but you know, you fall and it hurts. But then as time went on, over an hour or so, I realized I was losing a lot of mobility in my elbow. I could barely bend it. And so I ended up, it was a Saturday, I ended up going to the emergency room, and there they took x-rays, and initially I thought, oh, you probably just did some tissue damage, but the x-rays came back and I had a small fracture in my radial head. So I'm going to show you my good elbow. That's basically the bit sort of right in here. It's a type 1 fracture. Basically, they don't even put a splint on it. They just give me a sling, and I have to do some basic exercises to straighten it and turn it and stuff to make sure that I don't build up scar tissue and lose mobility. The elbow lets me know when I've done too much and it hurts, but basically I can't put any weight on it, or I can't even pull anything really hard, but it's going well. It's a lovely bruise on it right now, but other than that, I think it's healing nicely. I go back to the doctor in a couple of weeks for more x-rays, and hopefully everything will be okay. I was a little bit hesitant to go to the emergency room simply because I'm in Florida, and right now we have the highest rate of COVID patients in the hospital since I think the beginning of the pandemic. It's skyrocketed here in Florida again. I have had my vaccine, but as you know, with the Delta variant, you can still get sick even if it's not as serious as people who don't have the vaccination. But I don't even like to feel sick. But nonetheless, I'm glad I made that decision, and I didn't go to the main hospital in town. I went to, it was a proper emergency room, but it's a standalone facility. So if for some reason you have to be admitted, you are sent to the main hospital or another facility that can host you overnight. And it was relatively quiet when I was there. There was one woman who came in who said she did have COVID and she needed an IV because she couldn't keep anything down. Fortunately, I was quite far away from when she came in, so I stayed safe. It's now been a week and a half. I don't have COVID or anything else, so I'm very happy about that. But I'm just working through. For the first couple of days, it did affect my stitching because I had such limited mobility. Usually I'm a two-handed stitcher with Q-snaps, and basically I couldn't even get, the little sort of, when you're pulling through and putting back down, even that basic twisting motion was quite painful. And so I was doing everything with my right hand so I could stitch, and I could use this hand to balance the Q-snap. So at least I could do that. But it made me a lot slower. And now I, for the most part, can do it. If I'm doing a lot of stitching, especially as the thread gets shorter, and I'm having to do a little bit more twisting of my arm to get it back in the hole, then sometimes it gets a little bit tired. But other than that, it really isn't affecting my stitching. The big thing is I can't drive, so anytime I have to go anywhere, my husband has to drive me. Somehow I managed to have a lot of doctor's appointments unrelated to this stacked up last week between doctors and my orthodontist and everything. My husband has been a trooper, taking me where I need to go, but I'm hoping in 2 weeks I'll be able to get the sling off, and I'll be able to drive safely again. I can drive right now with one hand and with his hand just guiding the steering wheel, but it's not safe if someone were to dart in front of me or something. I don't want to not have full mobility. So we're taking it day by day. We don't go out that much anyhow, so it's fine. But you're not here so much to hear about my elbow injury. You're here to hear about the stitching. And also at the end of this video, I'm going to go through a lot of the games that I participate in. I'm going to put that at the end because I know not everyone is interested in the games, but it does motivate a lot of what I stitch. My big news is I was participating in Survivor through Semi-Sane Stitches, and I held on by the tips of my fingers until this morning, and I unfortunately did not make it through the elimination wheel, so I'm no longer officially participating in Survivor. But they have set it up so there are ways where people who are not officially playing the game can still support your team. And since there are only 2 people left on my team, they need all the support they can get. They're great stitchers and they're great women, but you know, it's hard when some teams still have 6 or 7 people left and you know, you only have 2, especially if you're trying to do things in shifts, and it just makes everything much more difficult. So with all of that, I am going to go ahead and show you what I'm stitching on, and I might reference the games from time to time, but I'll go through all of them at the end in more detail. So the first piece that I'm working on, that I show almost every video, is Cats in the Toy Box by Heaven and Earth Design, artwork by Lesley Anne Ivory. So I'm almost sort of done with the top part here. So we'll see, this is the far, you know, I think I've shown this before, but this is all that I've done so far. I'm now on this final page. So Tabby's tail's almost completed. I think I have a stitch or 2 left in there with some colors that just haven't come up yet. But now the tabby, the face is really starting to come together. I'm also doing colors in the koala's face right now. That's what I'm going to continue with this evening to get some more stitches, because I would love it if just had this whole block done. That would just be very satisfying. For those of you who do cross country, when you do full coverage, I hope that you share the satisfaction with me that when you've got these, you know, when you've got, you know, small bits of color that you haven't done yet, and then you finally get around, there's such satisfaction in sort of getting that completion and sort of filling in whatever object. So, you know, once, I think almost all of this is the same color, so just that feeling of getting the whole koala face done, I find very satisfying. And I really am hoping that I'll get to the point that at the end of this month, I'll be able to feel that I've done enough in this area to move the Q-snap and start working. I'll probably move it back over to this side and start working over here. I think you can start to see a cat head. You can see a shadow of a cat head there. So it will be more interesting than just working on the striped wallpaper. So that's where I am, and I pulled this out for, it's my focus piece for Full Coverage Fanatics, also my extra credit for Crystal Academy, and from time to time I will use it in the various challenges. It's a little bit hard right now when you're only doing a couple hundred stitches, and the stitches are so scattered, because I do try and be cognizant of what the admins have to look at. It's very hard for them to see progress when you're talking about, this is probably, you know, 10,000 stitch area, to say, yep, I put in 200 stitches now. Like if I, you know, this was all solid color here, so I did, you know, take a photo of just this area and put it in. But, you know, there's a lot of, for example, I think 844, and it's just sort of, you know, it was all over the place in here, and it's not fair to ask an admin to try and figure out where you are, and I'm not really talented enough to sort of circle the areas and say, okay, here's the big picture, but here's the areas where I you know, did some editing. I did some stitching, but that's the Cats in the Toy Box. The next big piece that I want to show you is another Heaven and Earth Designs artwork by Aimee Stewart. This is Little Cake Shop. This is the biggest piece that I have going right now, and basically one of the things, there's an acrostic in the Magazine Monthly Challenge, and the word for the acrostic is sunflowers, so I said L, Little Cake Shop, and my goal was to get these 2 stripes down to, basically, this is the 2 pages. I'm doing this in Pattern Keeper, but you can see where the page break is, and so I just wanted to get to the bottom of these stripes to the next 2 page. Obviously there's not a lot of space before you hit the Q-snap, and so that just seemed to be a good stopping point. I mean, obviously some of these stitches go further, and that's totally fine. But so I did that, and then pulled in a lot of colors, but then started these are actually posters on the wall. Started pulling in some of the colors on the frame of this, and then if they took me over in other places. and also then got a lot of color in especially this poster as well. And it's going to get a little bit harder. This is the regular size but max color, and so to get the details out of the poster, there are, you know, sometimes just 2 or 3 stitches of a particular color in this area. So at some point I just need to sit down and bite the bullet and say, okay, I'm just going to just work on this little area here, and it'll just take more time because I'll have to rethread my needle a lot. It's fine, but it doesn't work well when you're doing something like Survivor and you're trying to get in, you know, 500 stitches in the shortest period of time. I also did some work sort of up in the ceiling here. Again, this is fairly block stitching for a Haid, and so it just is something that I can do quickly. And because this is 22 count hardanger, I'm doing 1/1, and it full cross, and it just goes faster for me than some of my other projects, which even though they might have bigger blocks of color, just there's something about doing the 1/1 that just makes it go faster. So I am really enjoying doing this, and I probably will still pull it out a little bit more, but I've met my goal for what I wanted to put into it for Magazine Monthly Challenge. I also used it in Frogbusters. There was a sort of a week-long challenge of stitch on anything that reminds you of sweets. And so obviously cake is very sweet. And so I pulled this one out. So I had a lot of fun working on this one. The next one I want to show you is my oldest project. It's Old World Map by Artecy. And so I try to work on this daily if I have time. And this week in particular, I haven't been using it really for many challenges. I do use it for supernatural stitches. Because that almost every week now there is stitch on something with an angel, because those angels are frequently appearing. And so this has, you can see, I don't know if they're cherubs or angels. We're just going to call them angels for the purposes of the challenge. So what I've been trying to do certainly this week is pull colors. Like I'll just find a stitch that's over here that just sort of, for whatever reason, I hadn't done it before, and I'll pull it and then do as much as I can find until, you know, I stitch on this for about a half hour, 45 minutes until I have finished. You know, I may not color complete within the Q-snap, and this is an 11 by 17 Q-snap, so it's quite large. I may not color complete certainly in the block, but I certainly at least am sort of taking care of the area where it is. So for example, I pulled out 3078. There were just a few stitches down here, and then I was able to come up. This is the top of one of the views of the globe. And then I had done a lot of 3078 over here and here, because I think I did that for bingo. But I had wanted the stitches for that to be more concentrated so they could be seen more easily. Whereas for supernatural stitches, she's not really, you know, it's a personal challenge. You're not competing against anyone else. So the point, you know, you can lie, but who, you know, you're not benefiting from it. And so I just usually give a fairly large shot of this and then just sort of post my stitches at the end of the week. So that is Old World Map. I did, you know, periodically when I'm trying to stitch for speed or something, I'll pull out. You can kind of see a little bit, but there's a lot of 3865, that sort of winter white. And certainly this is, you know, I think this is the globe for the Eastern Hemisphere. So the top, there's a lot of white up here. As you get into the globe, I think the continents will start to appear a little bit further down. And so it's just easy for me to take a close-up photo, do a lot of stitching. And it does get a little boring after a while to do a lot of 3865. It's not the most interesting color, but it's good. Then I can alternate it with other colors, and it will all eventually come together. Okay, so the next piece I want to show you, this is a relatively old design. This is the Tea Table by Serendipity Designs. So for Survivor and Semi-Sane, we had sort of a linked color so that you had to, someone started and whatever floss number they used, the next stitcher had to pick something that ended with that floss number. And if it ended in 0, then it was sort of like wild card, and you could start with whatever floss you wanted. Someone stitched with 762, and I decided that 2 is probably the hardest number to find something to stitch with, because there's just not a lot of, at least in the DMC line, a lot of things that start with 2. I mean, it's 209, 210, 211, and then I think 225, and that's sort of it. Now, if you're doing other brands, that works, but for this one, it didn't. So, but I did. I knew this pattern because this is an older one, it relies a lot on those 200s, and so I think, I can't remember if it was 210, but so I basically just came down again. I wanted something that was easy to stitch, and we had to put in 200 stitches, which is quite a lot when you think about it. But this is some stitches on the teapot. And it was fairly straightforward stitching, so that was a lot of fun, just getting those in and having an excuse to pull this one out again. So don't know when I'm going to pull that one back out again, but it's a lot of fun to stitch when I do pull it out. All right, so the next one I worked on was O Joyous Day by Blackbird Designs. This was my, I can't remember if it was 7 or 8, but it was the whip go draw, the piece that I had to do. So I started stitching on it a little bit. So I had basically what I had done, I think I had this little bit done, so what I've been able to put in is not quite finish this flower, and then just do more here. So that was a couple hundred stitches that I put in. This is an enjoyable stitch, but it's not my fastest one, so especially when I was trying to stitch for speed in Survivor, it wasn't going to get pulled out. Now that I'm no longer officially part of the team, I'll easily be able to put in the rest of the stitches. And then there's this flower, and then I think there's one more flower after this, and then that's the edge of the pattern. So this stuff then will go very quickly across. It's very, it's all zigzag and straight lines, and then up here is satin stitch. So it shouldn't take me, once I get these 2 flowers done, to sort of finish off the top row, really shouldn't take me a huge amount of time. The next piece that I worked on, I want to show you, is White Owl by Artecy. This is artwork by Kayomi Harai. So for the magazine monthly challenge, I had come very close last month to a page finish on this, and I just hadn't quite gotten there. And so as a result, I just said page finish, and I'm very close to that. So page ends right about here, and then I think over here. So I had quite a bit left to do in this wing, so I was just pulling colors from the wing and then taking them down as needed. And then there were some sort of the blues here, so I've been just taking the colors and doing them as well. So I think I have 2 more colors left. There's one in the wing, 1 stitch that I think I just missed when I did that color originally, and then 939, which I think is like this little bit here. And like what I normally do is when I pull it out, if that color continues, not only do I finish off the strand, but I'll try and finish off everything that I've cut off of the 6th length. And since I do the loop start, I'll probably get a couple hundred stitches out of whatever I cut off. I just pull it off the skein. I don't have it on thread drops. And so this is all 939 up here, and there's a lot down here. So I'll get a lot more progress on that. And so it's just whenever I decide to pull this out again, it will be fairly quick stitching on that. Another one I pulled out, I pulled this one out for Survivor because we had to, basically they gave us an acrostic, and we had as a team to either stitch semi-sane or Survivor. My team picked semi-sane, and I was the only, and it had to be the first letter in the pattern and in the pattern name. And so I picked In the Garden. I was the only one who had an I. If you didn't have anything with that letter, you could find an object in one of yours, but it would have been penalty stitches for that. So I agreed to do this, although I will say I probably should have just picked up another piece and done something, because this one it's just slow stitching. It's on linen, and there's a lot of quarter stitches and 3/4 stitches and back stitching, and And the pattern itself, the symbols are quite small. And so it's just, I have to go like this and stare at it even with my glasses on. It's easier to see the linen than it is actually to see the pattern itself. But I do like the final result. So I put in, I got in about 400 stitches on this. So here's where I am. So basically what I was able to do was I got, I think, all of the full crosses finished in this birdhouse and most of the pole for the birdhouse, and then was able to get some stitches into this birdhouse as well. I had some done before on both of these, but not to the extent they were. And I did quite a bit of the back stitching, and again, it's really hard to see it, but the back stitching in the roof of that one birdhouse, and a little bit like on the entry of the birdhouse. I will pull this out for the magazine monthly challenge next month because we are playing bingo there, and for my bingo board I've decided every one of my magazine pieces, my current projects, will go on that bingo board, just as an excuse to pull them all out. The next one that I worked on, I want to show you. This is Pandemic Sampler by Sarcy Gurl. It was a free pattern that she gave out last year. It was very generous. It's a lovely pattern. I had this was my last project that I started in 2020 in preparation for No New Starts 2021. And because we had to get 200 stitches into the project for it to be considered a new start. And the problem was, for me, so this is, the left-hand border. It was probably like 1 or 2 flowers and some of the vine, and I was done. And then, because playing a little bit of fabric chicken with this, the length or the height of this pattern, I tend to leave a 3-inch border just in case, and it wasn't going to quite be a 3-inch border. And so what I ended up doing was sort of, I think I probably put another 100 stitches in early in the year, and then all of a sudden I was like, put it away, and then I pulled it out again. I'm like, I'm not actually sure where I was on this, because I wanted to start at the halfway point, so that my top and bottom, I would give myself the most space on the top and the bottom, and I wasn't there. But then I've seen so many videos recently where people are stitching on this. There's stitch-alongs. I'm not participating in those, but it's great to watch them. But enough people have been talking about it, and they have confirmed that all of these flowers are exactly the same. It's a repeating pattern up until you get to the very top and you have to turn the corner. And I said, it doesn't matter which flower I did. I just need to make sure that I get to the point where I can, get this flower, and then I haven't gone all the way down to the bottom yet, but that it's a pretty good sense of where I am. So I sort of just bit the bullet, worked my way up, and then this is the this is the top left corner. I think this stitch is like the very corner stitch. And so I certainly at the top have plenty of space, and I will make the assumption at the bottom I will have the same space. If for some reason I don't, I will figure it out. But one of the sad things about also is that I realize I love this modeling here. This thing reminds me of like one of those little troll dolls where you used to rub them in your hands and the hair would all stand up. I love this modeling here, but I think the border is just going to go straight over that, so it will be lost. Little cuteness in the modeling, but you know what? Not the end of the world. If I had tried to incorporate that, I can guarantee I would have not measured it properly anyhow, so I will get most of it covered up, but I'm fine with that. So again, my goal for letters of the month was to get 500 stitches in this. I got in almost 600 stitches, so it will probably get put down for a while, but I will, now that I sort of am more confident about where I am, it will be easier for me to want to pull this out of my project basket. And another one that I worked on, Evening Romance by Artecy. And so for the Magazine Monthly Challenge, my acrostic, I put E for Evening Romance, and my goal was to a page finish. This is very confetti heavy on a paper pattern only. So it just takes me a long time to work on this. So it's not always something I pull quickly. So this is the left-hand side. This is where I've been working, and I'm now over the halfway point of this, the top row. And so a lot of the colors, it's been fun as well because there's been a lot of pastel colors that I've been pulling out as I do this. And again, because it's a paper pattern, I'm often just, I'll pull out a color and I think I will have finished it on the page, and then I'll continue the thread just so I can finish it. And then, 2 days later, I realize there's one stitch left. And so I'll pull out the color and stitch again a little bit more. And then 2 days after that, I'll realize there was another one I missed. It's just the nature of the way I stitch. I'm fine with it. So literally, I joke and I wanted to get a page finished, but in effort to get this page finished, I did a ton of stitching, mainly over here, a little bit down here, just so I could get the page finished. But that just means I have that much of a jump start on this page. I was watching another video from someone who is relatively new for full coverage, and I believe Laura, you watched my video, so I just wanted to show you sort of how I do it. So while I am doing this page by page because it's just easier for me to read the chart that way, if I'm coming up to the page end and within that line I see that on the next page there is one stitch, so if it had been on the same page, the two stitches are adjacent to each other, I will go ahead and do that. And sometimes if there's a gap and then there's just one more, 1 or 2 stitches, I will do it similarly. And you can see that on White Owl where I had some that was coming across pretty far. If there are 20 stitches this way, as long as I have space in the Q-snap, I will go ahead and do all of those 20 stitches, just as an effort to try to avoid getting the page line. I also have switched from doing the X's. I used to do all the legs in one direction and then come back and finish the cross. I now do X's one at a time. I think it pulls the fabric less because when you're doing it one leg across, then everything is sort of pulling it over the other way. And by doing it one X at a time, it's less tension because that tension is between just the two holes. And yes, you are pulling it again, but now you're pulling it differently. That's what works for me. Other people probably have different experiences, but just my tension and the way that I'm stitching right now, that's the way I like to do it. So I think my page break is probably somewhere in here, but when I stitch, it will not be a straight line. I have in the past done full coverage where I think it was a huge pattern, and the whole top of it was just it was called Sunset Dolphin by Mystic Stitch. So the entire top row, there was nothing but like a purple and blue sky. It was gorgeous, but not a lot of variation. So I just stopped at the end, and then I would go and finish. And so I had a very defined page. And when I started working on the next page, I started doing it that way, and then I started to see that line, and that's when I started carrying it over a little bit more, and it did really make quite a difference. And I had that one professionally framed. I gave it away as a gift, so I no longer have it. Once they stretched it, you couldn't see the line, but people who are concerned about that, there's just little techniques that you can do. Some people feather. Pattern Keeper, quite frankly, I think has helped a lot of us to stop worrying about where the end of a page is. So we just sort of stitch what's natural. And if we, obviously if you have it in a Q-snap or a hoop or something, you're going to come up to an edge, but that edge doesn't have to be as well defined. Just little tips for people who are maybe a little bit concerned about doing full coverage. Yes, they take forever if you're doing a large piece, but they really, for me, are a lot of fun, and I find them very satisfying to do. The next piece I want to show you, this is Portrait of Veronica by Mirabilia. And this is the piece that I am using for the current spell that we are doing in Crystal Academy. So I've been working mostly in here. I have now gotten down to the tip of her elbow, and I have to admit, when I was stitching this and I realized that was her actual elbow, I was a little jealous because she doesn't have a bruise on hers like I do, but that's neither here nor there. So there is a little bit more width to this arm. I mean, most Mirabilias, they are naturally skinny, but she's not that skinny. But this is her hand, so I got all the way down here and finished off this color, which I think is 3770. So through her chest and her arm, I've now finished that, and I've started to pick up, and so I'm doing some stitches in here and then coming down here. Just there have been some gaps. Most of these gaps here are because of beads, or actually when I went back and looked at the pattern, they're actually I guess she's wearing a necklace, and there are some cross stitches, but not the skin one over one. So I will go back and fill those in when I get a chance. But nonetheless, just sort of filling some of the gaps and coming down. And so slowly by slowly, I'm plugging away on this one over one skin. I'm about halfway done with the stitches that I need for Crystal Academy. The required stitches won't get me to finishing the skin, but every step gets me closer. And last piece I want to show you, I'm so close to the end that I'm not going to show you the picture, but this is Apple Sampler from a very old issue of Just Cross Stitching Country Crafts, I believe from the 90s. Here's where I am now. The only thing that I have left to work on is I need to do all the back stitching in this bowl. I need to do this flower blossom, and there are a couple little stitches missing in this apple core. And that is it, and then I will be done. I did modify this pattern a little bit. There was another row of like big apples with names that just didn't seem, to me, it didn't add anything to the pattern. So here's where I am now. I worked on this a lot last night for when I was still fighting for my life in Survivor, and basically I was able to, I completed the entire, I was about to here on this border on the side, was able to pull this all the way down. It's a repetitive border, so very easy to stitch, and I didn't even have to count, even though you need to report count stitches, and then at the end I could just really quickly tally up. And then I also did some of these, I hadn't finished all these lines, these straight lines all the way across. I basically had to stop working on this last night because I was doing so much stitching that it then did start to bother my elbow. I don't think I'll pull this out again this month. I'll pull it out next month because when they're doing bingo for the magazine monthly challenge, I will actually try and get this as a finish in the bingo. And then for my plans, in addition to continuing to work on O Joyous Day for WIPGO and working on Portrait of Veronica for Crystal Academy. I'm not sure. I will have another one that I will work on next week for Crystal Academy. I'm not entirely sure which one that is. But for the magazine monthly challenge, I showed this in my last video, but this is my focus piece. It is Robin's birthday, who's one of the moderators of the magazine monthly cross stitch challenge group, and she loves birds. So this is my focus piece. I haven't really done much on it, so I'm not going to show you what I have. I've just basically done the frame, but I will work on this one. My goal is 500 stitches on that. And then also for WIPGO, this was my other WIPGO piece. This is Let Freedom Ring by Lila Studio. And just to remind you of where I am. Sorry, it does get hard sometimes to show this with the sling without strangling myself. Here's where I am now. Again, the color that is needed in here I am missing, and I probably will not make it to my local needlework store until early September, because I don't want to, my husband will be very happy to drive me, but I don't want him to actually know how long I would like to spend in the store. It's a 10-minute drive. He could come home and come back an hour later and pick me up, but who knows if an hour is enough time for me, because I really, I think as many of you know, once you go into a cross stitch store, you can get lost in there. And this cross stitch store is very, very small, but it's packed full of charts and fabric and other things. And I think even though it's small, I could just lose myself in it. So anyhow, this is where I am with Let Freedom Ring. So that is all of the stitching I have to show you. I do not have any haul, so I don't have any of that to show you. And I now want to jump in and talk about some of the games. So if that doesn't interest you, thank you for stopping on by, and I hope to see you again in a couple of weeks. But for those of you who are interested in the games, I wrote them all down because I always feel that when I'm talking about the games, I'm always missing something. And for those people who do games, you know, part of the fun of it is double dipping. So if you have a prompt to do something, can you use it for more than one challenge group? And that sort of, you know, something has a bird, great. Lots of us have patterns with birds, but maybe you also have to have something with a book. So now can you find something that has a bird and a book in it so that your 200 stitches that you have to put in, cross both of them. So the sort of, I don't want to say the main group that I work in, but one that does sort of inform some of my choices is, well, I will say No New Starts, because I decided very late last year that I was going to participate in No New Starts for 2021. Basically, they had, they basically said you get one freebie. I did that from the Stitching Book Club and I finished it already. But I decided to do it. But like many people participating in the group, a lot of us started things at the end of 2020 so that they would be ready to go in 2021. So I think whenever I am looking at what do I need to stitch, so last year I was able to say, you know what, this is an interesting prompt. There was one, for example, in Crystal Academy where we had to stitch something with a weather vane, which was very hard for a lot of people. I actually did have a weather vane in an active project, but to help my teammates, because many of them did not, I started another project that had a weather vane, and that was an option for me. With No New Starts, that is no longer an option, and I'm fine with that. It really does help me focus and, you know, not to do the squirrel. There are a lot of fun SALs out there, stitch-alongs, and there are a lot that say, I would love to do that. And so you start it, and people are stitching it, but especially the ones where someone's like, there's an existing pattern. The designer never meant for it to be a stitch-along. It's not a mystery stitch-along. And so people say, like, let's do it. And then they start it, and they don't do very much on it, or they're working on it, but there's not that sort of camaraderie. They would be like, hey, let me show you what I'm doing. There's not a lot of that. It's totally fine that it's run that way, but I think for me, like, that's part of the reason why I like to do the stitch-alongs, is to sort of see what others are doing and chasing that squirrel and doing it, and then not being able to scratch that itch of the sort of the camaraderie about it. Even though they're gorgeous patterns. So I've sort of moved, so No New Starts has stopped me from starting those kinds of projects that might be things that I would do because other people say, hey, let's do it, rather than like something that like is in me that I really, really want to do. And then No New Starts also has a lot of fun challenges within it that have nothing to do with, you know, they're always like, continue working on a project. Don't start one. So they have, two different kind of birthday ones. One is you follow the astrological signs. So it's Leo right now. So, and they always focus on what is the symbol. Is it a water, fire, wind, whatever sign? What is the birthstone, and what is the flower of that month? Now, obviously, things cross over because right now, you know, like the birthstone of the month is for all of August, but the Leo ends, I think, like, I should know this because I'm a Leo, depending on who you're talking to, between August 21st and August 23rd. And so so you can pick whatever you want. So for example, I am doing Year at Hawkrun Hollow for that because there is a lion in the March block. So that's one way to do it. They also have bi-weekly birthday challenges. So members of the group at the beginning of the year could say, hey, my birthday is this date. I want to do a stitch along with you know, whatever pattern. And they basically say, hey, if you have that pattern, great, but pick something by that designer if you don't have it. So frequently it's a Haid or a Mirabilia. And there's usually 2 or 3, you know, people say, hey, my birthday is this date. They have 2 or 3 patterns. So you can, you know, maybe you have a Mirabilia, but you don't have a Haid. You can do that. Although for me, there have been a lot of times where people are working and say, hey, this is what I want to do. And they'll have 2 or 3 options. And I despite the fact that I have a lot of projects, I don't have anything by that designer. It's fine. You don't have to do everything. They have periodically pop-up challenges. So last weekend they did what they called a whip frenzy, which is try to do put in 100 stitches on as many different projects as you can during a 24-hour period. Last weekend, I was still in my sulky, I don't say sulky mode, but I was still limited on my stitching, and just that effort of especially putting things into Q-snap and doing all of that, my elbow was not going to cooperate. So I chose not to participate in that one, even though I've done it 2 times before, and it's a lot of fun. And the way I do it is I spin the tiny decisions wheel, and just so it's totally arbitrary for me what I'm working on. But I chose not to do that. And they have a lot of other fun challenges as well, and the moderators of that are very active in the group. And one of them does a weekly homework video, not just for that group, but for many of the different challenge groups. So it's a lot of fun to do that. So that's No New Starts. Another one that usually has weekly challenges is Magical Stitches. And it basically, every week we get prompts that say, you're reading one of Rick Riordan's books. The first 5 books that we read were the Percy Jackson series and focused on the Greek gods. They now got, the characters are still there, but now we moved into the next set of books, which sort of, yes, it's the gods, but now perhaps they have more of a Roman flavor as opposed to a Greek flavor. And so, although the setting is sort of the same, and sort of the rules that he created in the first series are now in this one. So anyhow, so I'm listening to the book as an audiobook, little by little, and then they develop prompts based on where you are in the books. Usually it's a prompt like last week they had the word Olympus, and we had to find objects in our whip. So it was not the name of the whip, but objects in the whip that started with those letters. So I honestly, I can't remember what I did, but and for that group, if you don't either want to do the prompts or you don't have something that matches, you can just do the same amount of stitches into your oldest project. So sometimes I'll just put stitches into Old World Map and not have to think about it. And like this week, we don't actually have prompts per se. We're just stitching for numbers, and those stitches are used to somehow we're attacking each other and healing. I don't know. We have camp counselors as well, so each team has someone who sort of wrangles us, so to speak. I mean, very sweetly, Alma is very sweet, but basically sort of just helps us if we have questions or whatever, so that helps us sort of figure out what we're trying to do. And then there's also reading challenges that go with that. There's also monthly challenges, so you can build cabins. So I tend to build cabins, and I use my 2021 focus for that. So every 2,000 stitches, I just post a new one. You can fight monsters, and there are other things as well. There's a smalls challenge, a full coverage challenge. I decided not to participate in that simply because I joined the group a little bit late and didn't hear about it till later. So I'm not doing that one. But basically, whatever you're stitching on, they find a way for you to count those stitches. So they've done a lot of fun with that. Next one, I mentioned it quite a bit, is Crystal Academy. And this is basically, we are divided into dorms. And this semester, at the beginning of the term, we all picked, you picked 6 projects that were, you would have to master to master spells. And then there was a 7th one for extra credit. Now you could do, 7 different ones. You could double it up. You could do whatever you wanted. They didn't really care. You just had to declare at the beginning, this is what I want to work on. And so I chose to pick 7 different projects for that. And basically you would touch each of them twice. So we're now starting the 2nd set of spells. So I've gone back with Portrait of Veronica to the first piece that I worked on. So that's a lot of fun. We just finished a field trip. And then you could stitch on whatever you want, and if you sort of, and it was like an escape room. So there's lots of sort of twists and turns to Crystal Academy. They're sort of the basic, and then if you want to do more, periodically there'll be things that will come up that help you to do more. The next one I participate in quite a bit is Semi-Sane Stitchers, and this has lots of different games going on. There's the simplest one, which is the Focus Challenge, which is you pick one project, and every time you do 1,000 stitches, you post a picture of it. It's very low key. Apparently there's a challenge that do you get more stitches on that one than the person who runs the game. I didn't realize that until very recently. I think she stitches, I don't even come close to what she stitches, so I will never be beating her, but that's okay. And again, like I don't do this for any particular glory. I just do it to be part of sort of a team and interact with people and do that. Again, Survivor was through Semi-Sane, and it was a lot of fun. But also it was a lot of pressure to sort of say, okay, I need to get in as much as possible, and I need to do it exactly at this time. So like when we had a 6-hour period where we had to stitch as much as we could, and my team and I divided that up, and we said, okay, you're from 4 p.m. to 10 p.m., you're 10 p.m. to 4 a.m., you're 4 a.m. to 10 a.m. My team, when we were down to 3, was 2 of us I'm East Coast, one was Central Time, and one was in the UK, but she was a night owl, so she and I actually had more similar hours. Like the woman who was in Central Time actually did a lot more. She was stitching much later. So it made it challenging for us to try and come up with, how do you sort of do this so that we all are stitching during a certain period? Do we set alarm clocks? It was much easier. We had one person in Sri Lanka. We had one person in Australia. So then those kinds of, when you have that, it makes it easier to do. It was a lot of fun, and a team like that, you get to meet new people. Their teams were selected totally randomly. You get to meet new people, and it was my team at least, I thought that was a very supportive environment. Like some people, real life happens, and we worked around them, and one person was camping, and she had, I think, no access to internet, and she had data, so she could post things, but then she didn't have a charger, so her phone, she actually had to turn it off so that she wouldn't totally lose all of her battery, things like that. And you just work with them, and that person has come back, and she's still in the game. She managed to survive despite her limitations, and she's now stitching up a storm. And it's just really great to have that feeling of supporting each other. And then another, I think many of you are familiar with WhipGo. But basically you do your bingo board basically at the beginning of the year with what projects you want to do and what your goal is for each of those. My WhipGo, I do it for a monthly challenge. So if that number is drawn that month, I want to get done whatever I want to do for that month. I know some people set it as annual goals, and that's great. I choose to do it my way because, again, it just helps direct my stitching what I'm doing that month. And if I can find a way to double dip it, even better. And similar to that, this was one we were able to plan at the beginning of the year, letters of the month. That is where basically you take all of your projects and you go through the alphabet, and you pick, starting with A, going through Z, you do 2 letters every month. So the first January was A and B. So you have your whole plan for the year, and then whatever your goal is. And then you pick up, and just that month starts, and you have till the end of the month. You post your start pick, your finish pick, and you're done. You get to skip 2 letters. So I believe I skipped U and X. And either the pattern has to have that as one of the first words, or there has to be a major motif in that. So, for example, I didn't have anything with an N, so I did White Owl because night sky. In my opinion, that was a major motif in that pattern, because just the blue it's so vibrant, and so that's how I sort of got around that one. And then there are other groups that a lot of the point of the group is to encourage you to stitch, but they're not necessarily challenge based. But for example, Full Coverage Fanatics, basically it's got the standard like every week, show us your current project on, show me Wednesday or whatever that is. And so, but it's just, if you have questions about it or whatever, that's the main purpose of the group. They periodically have pop-up challenges. For example, last weekend, I can't remember what they called it, but it was basically stitch on your full coverage piece that has the fewest colors in it. And again, I was not feeling super stitchy last weekend. I was doing what I could, but the effort of going through everything and trying to figure out which one had the fewest colors, I just was not in my wheelhouse. So it would have been a lot of fun, but I didn't have the energy to go through it all. But they have a lot of fun things like that, and there's no pressure to participate or not. And similar to that, there's cross stitch frog busters, which is just, again, really it's designed to be a group to encourage us to stitch. So there's a lot of showing what you're stitching, but there's not a lot of pressure. There are periodically events like the one I showed you with Little Cake Shop, where it's like take a week and stitch on something that has something sweet. And so again, just motivation of like, what am I going to put stitches in? But no pressure to do it. If you want to do it, great. If you don't want to, great. They always have a weekend push where you can pick a project for the weekend and try and get in as many stitches as possible. So again, another fun low-key group. They also have things that, periodically, like if it's your birthday and you want to get a card, you can say, hey, and then, I want to get a card, and then others will, and then you can also volunteer to send cards. And so you're sort of randomly matched up with someone to send the cards to, and then whoever gets your name to receive one, but it's just a great way to sort of reach out, again, just get a little something for your birthday. Again, you're not sending patterns or completed projects. It's literally a birthday card, but it's a lot of fun. I've sent quite a few birthday cards out, and it's just an easy way to do it. Another one I've mentioned multiple times is the Magazine Monthly Cross Stitch Challenge. That is one that we basically, it was the brainchild of Carolyn Zook and Robin Hall. And basically we all get magazines and we look at them and they're pretty, and then they get put aside. And because just the nature of the magazine, it's not easy to say, oh, this is, it's not like a pattern where you can flip through and see the cover of the pattern really quickly. You have to go back and look into the magazine to see what is there. And human nature means we don't do that as often. And so basically, this is to encourage us to stitch things from our magazines. And so every month there is a theme. As I mentioned, for this month, the theme is birds. And so you pick up something with birds. Because I'm doing no new starts, and we had everything through the end of August, I pulled out a number of things and did 200 stitches so I could then work on it during the year. But I did not, there was one month where I was like, I just don't have anything. I don't want to start something just for the sake of starting it. So I skipped that month. And I've also started deliberately picking things that can fit multiple months. So one of them was, I think, blue, something that reminds me of blue. I did that for March. And then May was flowers. And so I used the same piece because I had a blue piece of fabric that I was working on. Used the same piece for May, and that way it just it meant I didn't have to start something new every month, but it also encouraged me to go back to those pieces. And then every month there's also an acrostic as well. You do not have to do magazine pieces for the acrostic. Quite frankly, I don't think Carolyn and Robin care if you're doing magazine pieces for the primary topic. They just want you to participate and have fun. And they both were really busy this summer. But they periodically have pop-up events, so we are actually playing a bingo for September. So I actually already planned my bingo board. I got, when I'm not in a stitchy mood, I'm often in a planning mood, and so that's what I did last weekend when I just wasn't in the mood to stitch so much because of my elbow. Another group that I am a member of is Supernatural Stitches. It's not really Stitch from Stash, but it is basically the idea that you watch an episode of Supernatural, there are prompts for it, and you try and stitch on one or as many prompts as you want. And there's a huge number of prompts, and there's no stitching limitation. It's basically if you need a, it's by the hundred. So if you put 3 stitches in, probably not going to be helpful. But if you put 1,000 stitches in, you get the currency is bullets, so to speak. So put in 1,000 stitches, you get 10 bullets, and basically then you set a dollar value or monetary value for that bullet. So my mind originally was I'm going to do $1 per bullet, and now I'm like, okay, I probably need to devalue the bullets because this is just like encourages me. I don't want to say to stitch more, but I'm encouraged to put things against the prompts. And so if I'm stitching 17,000 stitches a month, well over half of them I get credit for. So if it's say 10,000 stitches and I'm getting a bullet per stitch, that's I think $100. At the end of the year, that's over $1,000. That's too much budget for me. Just to think about like, $1,000 to spend on cross stitch because no one's giving me that money. But it's just sort of meant a way to, if you set an amount and are you stitching, there's something we said if you aren't stitching that much, maybe you shouldn't be buying that much. It's sort of that sort of concept. The same with same idea with Stitch from Stash. And then the last game I want to talk about, and all of these games or groups are found on Facebook. I'm also members of plenty more groups on Facebook that are not challenge groups, but various, Stitch Mania was I think the most common one. That group is now it's now been archived. It's no longer active. But there are lots of Flosstubers create groups, or someone who has a particular interest and they create a group. As well as designers and fabric dyers. I mean, there's just so much out there on Facebook. But there's one group that originally was on Facebook and they just got frustrated with the platform and they eventually moved it to a different platform. So they still have a residual presence on Facebook, but I think that basically is, if you want to join this game, you got to go here. And that's a Myth and Magic Stitch Wars. And that is stitching intensive. Is stitch on what you want, but it's a lot of stitching, especially if you are in one of the teams that sort of makes it towards the end. There are rounds, and basically the number of teams that participate will vary each time, but you get to the end of, if you're one of the teams. So the team I've been on has we were one of the final 2 teams, and we did not win. But when you're one of those final 2 teams, you're like, if you don't stitch a certain amount and the other team does, and there are some lightning fast stitchers out there, then, that's not me. I just have time. So that game is not for a lot of people, but it's really, really well done because you're stitching for ingredients, and there's also a strategy of that because the ingredients you can use to either create attacks or you can create healing, but you're making that and putting it in your inventory, and then there are times where like people can steal some things from your inventory, or you've stitched ingredients and they're sitting there and all of a sudden they're like, oops, all of your whatever ingredient got stolen. So there are lots of little fun things like that, and sometimes they talk about it's not BOGO, but it's SOGO, stitch one get one or something, like stores buy one get one free. Well, this is if you stitch 100 stitches and you get this one ingredient, you get a second. You don't basically 100 gets you 2 of that ingredient. So it's a lot of fun, and again, a lot of teamwork in that. But very competitive. I've never had any issues with anyone being nasty. I don't think there is. But it is competitive. And your teammates, are relying on you to get things done. And, people have jobs and families and friends, and they want to go out and do other things as well. So it's not like people are just sitting there and stitching. So it can be quite difficult at times. And a lot of the pressure is put on yourself. We're not saying don't go out and enjoy your life. But nonetheless, it can be intense during certain periods. And I meant to say this at the beginning when I talked about the games, because I don't know how many people will still be sticking around. But I would like to thank all of the administrators and the moderators of all of these games. You guys put in so much you don't get paid anything, and you put in so much of your time and energy and creativity into doing these games. And I know sometimes people are not as kind as they should be to the people who are doing this. And I just want to say a heartfelt thank you, because I really do appreciate everything that you do. I know it's a lot of work, and also, again, people have kids and partners and friends and jobs and other things that pull in their life, and yet they're really spending a lot of time doing this. And then I just realized, so thank you for all of that. And I realized there are 4 other games that I participate in. These all are stitching just for numbers, and so I often will take the same photo, post it in 4 groups at the same time. And again, the reason why I do it is basically, it's just the camaraderie. Each of these groups, the team makeups are a little bit different. There are some overlap. There's a couple of them where I'm with more or less the same people in one group as another, but there are new people who come in, and then 2 of the others are just totally different. And so it's just fun to participate, and it's easy. So there's Survival is Stitchiest. That's been around for a few months. Basically, you're just, trying to stay alive. You can stitch for supplies, which is food and water and lumber and whatever else you need to survive. You can do that there. And then there's also, like, we're building things, and so our team has spent a lot of time. We built a house, and now we're spending a lot of time putting plumbing in. And then there periodically will be hunts. And then at some point, there are some people who are designated as warriors and healers. I'm not any of that, which is fine with me. And I just plug away on my plumbing. And then another one, and then the next thing I'm going to talk about came up very, very recently, within the past couple of weeks. One of them is Stitching Around the World, and that is basically, as a group, you're going to a place and you are, I would say Stitching Around the World and Amazing Stitching Explorers. Basically, as a group, you're going and visiting different places. One of the groups, basically, you're going to visit a place, and then you're doing some sightseeing while you're there. So it's just sort of, what do you go to a country, what do you see while you're there? And so it's sort of fun to learn a little bit about a country, and to do that. And then the other one, it's sort of more like you have to work for your keep, so to speak. But again, you're doing this as a team. And so, and again, it's just about the camaraderie for me. And then the last one is the Harry Potter cross-stitch game. And I think I'm a Ravenclaw. I'm not a huge Harry Potter fan, but some of my friends from Crystal Academy were doing that, so I joined them as well. And basically, initially we had to stitch for items, a bed, a wand, and a robe, and then we got this. You had to stitch for those within a team, but individually. And then once we got that, we're now basically competing, and I think there's only 2 other houses. We're missing one. We're for daily stitch totals. I'm sure at some point the moderators will come up with sort of other fun challenges along the way. But again, this group has been in existence for only about 2 weeks, and all these are developing. And I know there have been lots of other games that have come up on Facebook, and they have some have come up and they really flourished. Others have come up and folded. Again, I think a lot of people have a lot of really great ideas out there, and they just don't know how much work it takes. So for heartfelt thank you from me for all of you who do create, moderate, administer the games. Thank you so much. I have a lot of fun doing it. I am not an administrator or moderator. In a couple of the games, I've sort of been, I don't want to call them captains, but sort of leading whatever group I'm in, just to help make sure that everyone understands the rules in my small group, or knows where to post things, or make sure that they have the latest information. So I am playing that small role. But thank you to all of those of you who have really stepped up and given a lot of us a platform to meet new stitchers, especially important during these times where many of us are limiting our interactions outside. Again, I'm in Florida. COVID is ravaging this state right now. And I'm in a university town. which means we have a lot of people who, students have come back. So a lot of people who've come from other locations are coming back to town, and they're young and they want to have fun. And I understand that, but they're not always wearing masks when they're out having fun. And even though the student population is actually a very high vaccination rate, nonetheless, there's just those kinds of issues. And so these games sort of help me reach out to people, especially since I am in the town where I grew up, but I left when I was a teenager. I'm now back in this town. My parents are here. I'm married here with my husband, but I came back during the pandemic, so I haven't had a chance to really go out and meet a lot of people. I did meet with a Stitchy group, but I'm even stepping back from that for a while things are so bad, and just I'm on a chat with those women, and just the stories that they are telling about people who, friends of friends who were not vaccinated who have passed away or are in the ICU, and it's a very serious situation in Florida right now. So these groups have really helped me sort of maintain human connections when I can't do it in person. So thank you, everyone. This has been a long one, and for those of you who stuck around for the end, happy stitching.